Hi, everyone. This is Sean Haney of RealAgriculture.com and Real Ag Radio on Rural Radio 147, Sirius XM. Welcome to the Canola Podcast, brought to you by InVigor Hybrid Canola from BASF. Today's episode is called Shake It, Rattle It, and Roll It, and will feature Canadian InVigor lead Blaine Wachishin and longtime InVigor grower Nicola Dow. Blaine, thanks a lot for joining us here today. Why are we calling this episode Shake It, Rattle It, Roll It?
Hey, Sean, and thanks for having us. Well, you remember a while back we had an InVigor Twitter campaign called #SellTheSwather. That caused quite a stir. Lots of debate, discussion from both sides in favor of the swather or #KepTheSwather. Well, this is an extension of that. It was interesting. We want to have a little fun with that.
Yeah, that's pretty interesting. I remember that campaign, and when you first told me about it, and there was some great pictures that were shared all over social media of people parking their swather in the trees and the long grass, and some great fun with it. Can you tell us a bit more about this idea of shake it, rattle it, and roll it, and what do you mean?
Well, over the years we've had our InVigor patented pod shatter trait. People were taking videos of hitting it on the truck, on the hood of the truck, and other things along that line. And we've had some videos with the Will It Shatter videos, and we've been having some fun lately showing the difference between our patented pod shatter trait versus non-pod shatter reduction traits. So we call it the 5-gallon pail test. You put in one plant of our InVigor hybrids with the patented pod shatter reduction trait in one pail, and then one plant of a non-pod shatter reduction trait in another pail. Put the lids on, then you shake it, you rattle it and roll it, and the pails in the same way to see the difference. And we thought this was kind of hokey at the beginning, but we tried it and we saw a lot of difference. We're seeing a bit of the shelling in the non-pod shatter traits, and we're seeing the InVigor patented pod shatter trait holding up. So that's what we want to make sure. We've had some tough conditions out there in 2021, and it's obviously a big drought in Western Canada. And we want growers to understand the pod shatter trait holds up even under tough conditions. And we're seeing a bit of difference of that on Twitter and some of the conversation. But with this test on your own farm, with take ours versus the competition, use a ping pong ball or a wiffle ball or something like that, and you can see the difference pretty quickly. I'd also stay tuned for this fall for some fun with our new Will It Shatter videos. We'll have some interesting ones on there for our viewers to look at.
That sounds like a lot of fun. Pretty cool how you can turn some kind of comical or fun into actually a really good demonstration of how the trait works and how powerful it actually can be. So let's bring in Nicola here. Nicola, tell us about your farm.
Hi, Sean. So my farm is near Portage la Prairie, Manitoba. We're a 1,400-acre mixed grain farm. And I farm alongside with my dad and my brother. So my brother and I are third-generation farmers for this location, but our family has certainly been farming a lot longer than that. Right now, the crops that we're growing is wheat, oats, canola, corn, and soybeans. And we're thinking about giving peas a shot next year, too.
Now, I mentioned the opening, long-time InVigor grower. How long have you been growing InVigor?
That's a really good question that I should have asked my dad. We've certainly been growing InVigor as long as I have been involved in the farm. And I think my dad was a very early adopter of it.
So, Nicola, you're involved with industry advocacy as well. Can you tell us a little bit about some of the stuff you're working on?
So I'm one of the directors of Manitoba Canola Growers, which in and of itself is just been a fantastic opportunity, but it's also given me a platform to be involved in other industry work. And so one of the things that I've been involved with is being part of the WCC-RRC. So that stands for the Western Canadian Canola and Rapeseed Recommending Committee, a whole mouthful. And, that's a really interesting committee in and of itself. But part of what makes it such a neat place to be involved with is that a lot of people from across the canola industry are all at the table. And it's kind of that coffee shop where everyone hangs out that you want to see. And so because of that, it can be a platform for some other work to come out of. And one of the things that I've been working on this year is chairing a subcommittee out of the WCC-RRC that's working on developing a canola shadow rating. So this is something that would then be a standard across the industry and is work that has really been pushed from canola farmers. And so I'm really excited about it.
How's your season been so far?
It has been a really tough season this year, for sure. I'm fortunate in that our farm is not in one of the worst areas. I wouldn't say we're in the best, but it certainly has not been the worst. So it's been a difficult season, and canola particularly has had a rough season. So there's certainly the drought, which is affecting any crop really across the board, all across the prairies. But canola's had some extra challenges even on top of that. And so it was a really difficult start to the season. Where I am, we went through, it was very dry when we were seeding. We got the seed in the ground. We got a really timely rain. And then as the canola is coming up, we got a frost. A week later, we got that extreme heat and flea beetles that moved in for about a month. And since then, it's just been hot and extremely, extremely dry. I should have done the math. I'm thinking since May, we've probably had maybe 2 inches of rain, which is better than a lot of places, but is certainly difficult. And drought itself is stressful for the crops, but it also brings on a whole host of other problems. And right now, grasshoppers are the latest one that we've been dealing with, and it's extreme. We've had bad grasshoppers a few years, and without a doubt, it's biblical proportions of grasshoppers right now. Harvest is underway now, and I think everyone is just trying to focus on that and a few of even the good surprises we've had so far, but it's been very difficult.
Yeah, I've heard from a lot of farmers. They bring up 1988 is the example. So, I'm heartbreaking the way that you tell some of the conditions. But I'm glad to see you can still laugh and sort of smirk about some of the stuff. You kind of have to keep things in perspective. When it comes to harvesting canola, what's your preferred method? Do you straight cut, swath, or a little bit of both?
Our first choice is always straight cut. We've been straight cutting canola for quite a long time. I remember when L140P came out, and I think the first year with it, my dad, I wasn't on the farm full time yet. I was involved, but not full time. And I think Dad did a late swath on it because he was, like a lot of people, a little nervous. But since then, we kind of jumped both feet in with straight cutting, and that's our first choice. Some years, there can be conditions in the field that we might get the swather out. This year, I expect we're going to swath a little bit, simply because with the extreme conditions that we had and some canola reseed and patches in fields, we've got some extreme variability. And certainly having pod shatter canola is a great tool in years like this to help manage that risk. But between the variability and the poor crop, we're not really wanting to spend more money and do some pre-harvest applications. And so the swather starts to look good in situations like that.
I've known Nicola for quite a few years, and it's interesting some of the conversations she brings up, the delayed swath, fully in it. If it doesn't fit, a lot of growers maybe haven't ran to the pod shatter technology as quickly because, we talk about delayed swathing. That's one of the things about the pod shatter technology. It's strong if you've got some green, you've got some low spots. This is also very strong and suitable for delayed swathing. The later swath, your risk of pod shatter, pod drop, I think are quite minimal. So, it fits in that field as well, because, we got a little carried away when we talked all about straight cutting and at the very beginning, and, it is very suitable for straight cutting. And I guess a couple things here I just wanted to mention, Sean. We talked about the launch of InVigor L140P, or Nicola did. Then we moved to bring in InVigor L233P, which was one seed of the year last year in Germination Magazine. One of the things about, we're very fortunate to have a patented trait which we see a lot of consistency in performance of how it performs. But for us, it's just not about pod shatter. We do talk about that pod drop too. So we have patented traits with pod shatter, but we also select for pod drop. And that's one of the things we want to make sure people understand, that because we like to have a lot of consistency in performance of all of our pod shatter hybrids. It's very important for us because we want to make sure we set the expectations. But, moving back many years ago, I guess, if there was a Canola Hall of Fame, InVigor L233 would be in it, as well as Hyola 401. I think one of the other ones would be InVigor 5440. And I was able to be managing that hybrid. And one of the things about that, it did have some pod shatter characteristics where people were straight cutting it and it had less shelling. But that was just done through natural plant breeding. And I think now we've moved the bar ahead. It wasn't bulletproof now. And I won't say their patented pod shatter trait is bulletproof either, but it's certainly closed the window on managing that risk. And I think that's truly the patented trait it's truly a game changer. So you've seen a lot of that, but it's all about risk management. We're seeing that this year. It's so dry out there. Growers are wondering, should they swath? Is it worth it? And, growers have to make that decision, obviously, but, having that trait in your toolkit is certainly something that you want to start with, I think, to help minimize your risk.
Yeah, I think of just the word flexibility when I think of when it comes to the harvest strategy, what it provides you. Nicola, how do you find pod shatter reduction technology helps you, and how do you choose the right hybrid to make all that happen?
As Blaine was saying, pod shatter is just a really fantastic risk management tool. And we embraced it, first of all, because we had the ability to straight cut and we were getting phenomenal yields by doing that. And I think that's why many farmers, when pod shatter was a new thing, transitioned really quickly over to it. At this point, we've worked with it for a number of years and we've seen not just the harvest and the obvious yield benefits to it, but it's been fantastic for just managing workload. And when you have a family farm, for us, it's just a family operation. Time is really valuable. And so having a tool that can help us reduce time in the field at harvest by not swathing is valuable. And having something that can reduce some stress too by not being worried about it standing in the field is also valuable.
So if you're going to be growing a pod shatter reduction hybrid, does it change anything when you start planning your season?
On the front end of the season, I don't think it makes a big difference, kind of up until the fall timing. In a way, I think canola is canola. But certainly at harvest time, it does change how we plan the season. When I think back of growing up on the farm, my memories of harvest as a kid were that it was this big flurry of activity. It was very intense, and it seemed like everything went at once. And I'm sure that some of it is just how a child remembers things is not always accurate to how it is. But realistically, it used to be, at least on our farm with the crops that we grew, that kind of everything was ready. And it was late August, September, a big rush, you get everything off. And that was harvest. And between the crops that we're growing and some differences in how different hybrids and varieties have changed, it has really changed the harvest season. And so it seems that now harvest, rather than being this one intense period of time, is a series of short sprints. Having pod shatter in canola specifically, it's changed the timing of canola harvest. For us, it's moved it slightly later. There's things that you can do to speed it up. And I have lots of neighbors that, whether they still do a late swath on their pod shatter canola, whether they're a little more aggressive on some pre-harvest options, there's ways to bring it in early. But with how we manage it, it pushes it a little bit later. And for time management harvest, we've actually found that to be a good thing. Initially, it can seem intimidating just because it's different. But so the timing has certainly changed kind of how we plan out, how we anticipate harvest.
Yeah, you had some really good advice there. Do you have any additional tips and tricks when you're growing a pod shatter reduction hybrid?
I think the best thing that any farmer can do to manage pod shatter well is to manage it field by field. And I think that's always true of farming. If you want to do a really good job, you can't just treat, all your canola acres the same. And it's the same with pod shatter. Pod shatter has a lot of forgiveness built into it, more so than other things do. But I still think if you want to really be on the top end of growing it, especially as it's coming into harvest time, managing every field as it on its own ground is really valuable. And so, we, on a normal year, this year, we kind of said the spending needed to stop on the canola acres, but normally we would be assessing every field by field to say, are the conditions here that we can just let this stand and we're just going to wait until it's ready for harvest? Maybe there's some weeds, and we often have issues with perennial weeds like thistles, that having some pre-harvest glyphosate applied is really valuable for, longer term management of that field. And so we would make that decision. Other times, it might be a clean field, but it's just uneven and we want it ready fast. And so looking at something like a true desiccant in that situation can be advantageous. And, other times this year, we're in a situation of just not wanting to spend more money on a poor crop, having extreme variability. I had some fields that sections were drying up and turning gold, and other sections were gold because they were still flowering all at the same time. And so, looking at a crop like that and knowing that I could just wait. I could wait it out and let it all mature to straight cut and do nothing. But it is a little riskier move, and a lot can happen weather-wise. And so knowing that there is the flexibility too to go in and swath and just try to get everything coming in together.
Hey, Sean and Nicola, just to further on some of the comments you've made over the years, you talk about sustainability. I have a bit of a challenge with that word being improperly used many times. But one of the things that, with pod shatter trait, I remember there's a farmer, I won't mention his name, but when we were first launching pod shatter trait with InVigor L140P, he walked up to me and told me he had 12,000 acres booked for next year. And I'm like, I don't think we even knew what we had. So we had the conversation with him about why. And, you talk about the fuel. We talk about the labor. And one of his challenges is labor help in the swathers as well. Just trying to find the labor to do that versus having somebody running the combines with the straight cut headers. So it's certainly the fuel costs of the swather, the labor, those all jumped in here too. I guess one of the things there's so much to talk about pod shatter with our traits, the less volunteers. I mean, there still can be volunteers in the field, and we know volunteer canola can be around for quite a few years, but they're minimizing that as well. So that's one of the big benefits. But to me, Nicola talked about, seeing some pod shatter, pod drop on some of the DST trials a couple of years ago. We've taken that to the next step, and I'm going to make a shameless plug for InVigorResults.ca. Go take a look at it. Take a look at the 2020 trials, especially moose jaw. We had some trays. We actually started putting trays in the DST trials in some of the fields to see what would happen, and unfortunately for the grower, but for our trial, it was a benefit. We were able to see an extreme windstorm in the moose jaw site on InVigorResults.ca. You'll see it. There's some pictures there, and there is a 15 to 20 bushel yield difference. You're also going to see the shelling, the pods, some of the seeds in the trays as well, and we'll be showing that a bit more this year. We've got a lot of those trays out there this year. It looks like a tough year. We don't hope for win for any growers, but it does happen, and we want to make sure people understand what harvest losses look like. So we're trying to take it to the next step so people can visualize it, because even in our simple trials, in the early days when we were doing our DSTs, we saw a 4 to 5% yield difference, and we've seen that with InVigor L140P, and we've seen that with InVigor L233P, a 4 to 5% yield difference between straight cut and swathing. So that, and obviously in the favor of straight cutting. So you can see that the benefit, it just allows the seed to finish, grow get a little bit bigger. And, we actually have seen higher TSWs as well by just letting the seed go to full maturity, I guess. So that's one of the interesting things with that as well. And it is exciting to be having this technology. And I think we just want growers to make sure they're more aware of, when they're making a decision, pod shatter is something that you should plan for, I think, in that. And with us, with BASF, almost all of our portfolio is all pod shatter now. We've gone to that. We're in the high 90s of our offerings. We have a few hybrids left that are basically still suitable for swathing, but we're moving the whole portfolio to that just because we believe this technology is managing growers' risk, and they have adopted it with their checkbooks and wallets. They purchased these, even though the other ones are available. We've seen a very mass movement to this pod shatter trait.
Nicola, how many acres of pod shatter reduction hybrids do you grow, and what percentage of that do you think you're going to be straight cutting?
We're not a big farm, so we don't have the 12,000 acres or anything that Blaine was talking about. So on our farm, we're usually around 350 acres of canola, and that's what we're at this year. And 100% of that is pod shatter canola. Since pod shatter came out, I think the first year it was out, we maybe did half the farm in it. And since then, it's really been wall to wall. The farm has consistently been pod shatter. And our first choice is always to straight cut. I think probably in the next couple days here, I'm going to be going around and kind of doing a last loop assessment on our fields for how we're going to manage them for harvest. I'm anticipating this year probably 80% is going to be straight cut. And with some of the reseed and just poor conditions we had, I'm thinking we're going to be swathing some headlands and just some sections of fields.
Did you try any new InVigor hybrids this year?
So one that's new to us that we've been growing this year is L340. I believe it came out last year, the year before. So it's not brand new to the market. It's new on our farm. We're growing it this year alongside L233P, which is certainly not new, but it's just been a really consistent performer for us. And admittedly, this has been a tough year to assess some of the differences that we might look for. Drought has a way of equalizing the playing field in some ways, and other times you'll see one thing shine through it. But certainly in the case of canola this year, it's been difficult to discern some of different traits, whether it be standability or even true yield potential, just because everything has been brought down from the drought.
And Blaine, I guess when we think about the InVigor pod shatter reduction trait, like the track record here is well established.
Yeah, Sean, it has been. And, I was very fortunate to have been, that would be one highlight of a person's career is to be able to launch this game-changing technology. And growers have adopted this trait. It's been sold on over 40 million acres already since it was launched in 2014. Just phenomenal. The growers, some great conversations you have over the years of how it's changed their technology. It's just a pleasure to be part of it. But, we can't rest on our laurels. And I think one of the things we need to make sure is that people continue to see InVigor is innovating and meeting demand for the future. And I think some of the things we've got a couple new hybrids for 2022. We've got a InVigor L343 PC. This will have a great fit. It's a bit earlier. It'll have a nice fit for Alberta. It has second generation clubroot resistance. And to growers, if you don't need second generation clubroot resistance, don't run to it. Save it for when you need to combat clubroot. I think that would be one of the big things. It's going to have a great fit for Alberta because we've got some breakthrough on first generation clubroot resistance. So we need to manage it, but it'll be a great fit, and it's got some pretty strong yield numbers on it and the maturity and standability. So it'll be a nice fit for that. InVigor L356 PC. It's a first generation clubroot. So this could go anywhere in Western Canada. It's a 5 for maturity, so it's right for most of the shorter to longer growing zones. So I'll have a nice fit for that. But great standability, pod shatter traits, and it was one of our highest yielding. So, we need to keep innovating to keep ahead of the competition. I think that's one of the things that, hats off to our breeders, and our access to really strong germplasm helps us. But I guess that's one of the things we wanted. And I guess another thing for InVigor this year is we will be introducing Vacoris seed treatment. And Vacoris seed treatment, you know what? It's a BASF in-house solution. I think one of the big things for us will be a step up will be its benefits with airborne blackleg. Stay tuned, look for more details on that. But very, very, I think it'll be a big benefit for us and for the InVigor franchise. So it doesn't take away from our hybrids. All our hybrids are all ours for blackleg already, our resistance. But it'll be something to help complement the InVigor genetics that we already have. Don't want to dwell on the drought, but we do want to thank our growers. It's been a tough year for them, but we need to make sure we look onward and upward. 2022 marks the 25th anniversary of InVigor.
Great stuff there from Blaine and Nicola. Thanks for joining us today on the Canola podcast. It was great to get a grower's perspective on innovation while also having an expert like Blaine explain how InVigor's patented pod shatter reduction trait has been developed over the years to help meet the diverse needs of canola growers across Canada. I'm your host, Sean Haney. Thanks a lot for joining us here today. Cheers, everybody.